Welcome back, Honestman, Skyrim. This is going to be an episode 0 for my second playthrough, my survival playthrough that's coming up, but also a bit of a retrospective on my first playthrough and some of the lessons learned. I also want to note that I'm going to be doing a deeper dive on the skill trees in a separate episode. That's going to be sort of a standalone deal. So I'm going to touch on some skill topics today, but not to the depth that I want to in sort of the standalone video. So be on the lookout for that. In any event, I think skills probably are a good place to jump in, looking back at my first playthrough. First off is illusion. I really never did anything with illusion. I didn't put any points into the tree. Didn't get much value out of this. This was just a level mill to help push my character level through skill ups here, and that was primarily just through spamming muffle. So not a lot going on with illusion. I honestly don't see that changing very much. It maybe would have been nice if I could have gotten in here a little sooner and gotten invisibility going, but that never materialized in my first playthrough. Conjuration, destruction, and restoration, I never figured out a good way of leveling any of these. And the only reason they're this high is because I bought ranks in training to get them over 50. So, yeah, suffice to say, struggled mightily with these three. Restoration and conjuration, I don't think it's any major loss because there's nothing in these trees I really care about anyway. But destruction, I really wanted to get the second level augmented ranks for fire, frost, and shock. Never got there. I needed to get to 60. Never got there. Alteration was great, just from a perspective of magic resistance. I think that's definitely worth it. And then after that, that was 70. 70 to 99 was just similar to illusion, just kind of grinding ranks. Telekinesis is great here. I think I maybe did some detect life sort of things in like actual usage. Other than that, not a whole lot going on with alteration, quite frankly. Paralysis maybe would have been a good thing to get to and like use, but by the time I was deep enough into alteration for paralysis, I had something better than paralysis, which is simply killing people. So that was my solution there. But yeah, certainly I appreciated the fact that it was easier to grind than these other ones. The other thing I'll note about destruction, since I'm talking trash about it, is just too weak. Like, I was seriously trying to grind this. I was trying to use, like, fireball and things. I was getting hardly any skill from it whatsoever. So, and I certainly wasn't, like, nuking enemies and killing them with stuff. It just wasn't powerful enough. So I was extremely disappointed in destruction. Enchanting, smithing, these are both awesome. You got to get deep into those for crafting stuff. And I subsequently discovered, right after I finished my playthrough and started digging into the information available, that alchemy, you really want alchemy. And as you can see, I did virtually nothing with alchemy. Similar to like restoration and conjuration and destruction, the only reason it's this high is because I bought ranks to get to 50. I trained up. I think I literally made one potion the entire game, and that was about it. I'm just not interested in the alchemy. Like, just me as a person, like sitting down and like tasting ingredients and trying to come up with recipes, that's not fun. Obviously, part of that is self-inflicted because I wasn't using external resources. I could have looked up recipes. But again, it's just not really my style. Going in for sort of a blind first playthrough kind of experience. If the game doesn't, teach me what I need to know to be effective in alchemy, and it basically just comes down to, well, experiment and figure it out. If I don't see a clear payoff to that, I'm not going to bother. And as you can see here, I never bothered. Which was, I think it worked out fine, ultimately. But you really want the triumvirate, from what I understand, of alchemy, enchantment and smithing to really maximize your sort of end game equipment. I just did the 2 pieces and I was pretty happy with the results there. Right? Just like I did 1 round of, okay, I'm going to create some buffed up smithing gear and then use that smithing gear to create some honed equipment and then enchant that honed equipment. I just did like 1 cycle of that. I thought I was in pretty good shape. So I think there's maybe a lesson in that. But if you really want to go next level, apparently you need the alchemy to juice up the potions for enchanting and smithing to take it to sort of the next level. So then if I had done that, I could have gotten even bigger multipliers on my gear. And I even could have had a round of creating alchemy boosting gear to make even better potions for boosting enchanting and smithing, and sort of go through that loop at least twice, I think. Because you'd create potions to boost your enchanting, and then you would use your boosted enchanting to create gear that improves your potions, and they'd use that gear to make better potions to improve your chanting. Hopefully you kind of get the idea. Anyway, suffice to say, I obviously didn't do that with my first playthrough. But again, just going enchanting and smithing, I was pretty happy with the result. I didn't feel like I was struggling or anything like that, so your mileage may vary. I never did get into the right-hand side of the smithing tree. I think that's definitely going to change in my next playthrough. I'm going to have to get over into Ebony. And also want Dwarven, for that matter. And there's a couple of specific pieces of equipment that are driving me in that direction. I think the good news, though, is that once you finish your crafting, you can just legendary this and get all your points back. Or there's another mechanism in the Dragonborn expansion where you can refund your points. I don't know precisely how that works. I did not find that or engage that in my first playthrough, but it's out there. So, yeah, I could refund both of these or make them both legendary and just kind of forget about them after that. One of the two. Heavy armor, didn't do anything with it. I think it's bad. Again, the only reason this is as high as it is because I trained up. Same thing with two-handed. I trained this all the way up using, I forget his name. There's the 2 brothers that are in the companions. One of the brothers. One of them teaches two-handed, the other one teaches heavy armor. I never got back into two-handed after the first couple of episodes on my first playthrough. Block. I have a little remorse here. I put 2 points into shield wall. That feels like a waste. Next playthrough, it's just going to be 1 point. And I loved Power Bash. I'm definitely getting Power Bash again. But then I also want to try Quick Reflexes. I'm hearing really good things about that. So I want to try that on my next playthrough. One-handed. I ended up going for Fighting Stance and Savage Strike. Just because Savage Strike gives you decapitations. I did this very late. I liked it just for kind of fun and flavor to get the decapitation animation sometimes. But ultimately, you know, those 2 points were not necessary. I think just maxing out the base Seer Armsman is fine. And again, I'm going to go through a deeper dive on all of these skill trees in a later episode. But just kind of reviewing my experience from my first playthrough and how I might adjust in my second playthrough. Archery, finished at 90 here. I was super late into Steady Hand. Really wish I had gotten into that sooner to slow time. That's just great. So that's a lesson learned there. Definitely don't drag your feet on that. Light armor, I ended up 4 ranks into Agile Defender, as well as getting up into Windwalker. I still do like Windwalker. I'm not sure how valuable it is in practice, but at least on paper, I still like Windwalker, and I still think that's a good play. But 4 ranks into Agile Defender definitely wasn't necessary, because I figured out after the fact, like, there's an armor cap. And I think I'm actually over the armor cap with my Dragon Scale gear. So I didn't actually need all these ranks. I believe I could hit the armor cap with fewer points into Agile Defender with my current kit. So that was a lesson learned. I can cut this closer to the bone. Sneak. Obviously sneak is huge. Love the sneak. I really don't have any remorse here. I ended up taking all the way to Shadow Warrior. I think in my next playthrough, I'm probably going to slow play this left-hand branch. I'm probably going to slow play Muffled Movement and up that side because I'm planning to sort of beeline to some gear that's going to give me Muffle on my boots. And if you have Muffle on your boots, then you don't really need Muffled Movement. And then Lightfoot and Silent Roll are kind of pointless. So those are points I can allocate in other places. Lockpicking, I don't have much to say about lockpicking. You don't need it. I legendaried it twice already. Pickpocket, I maxed it but never bothered to legendary. I'm going to have some different strategies around that going into my next playthrough. I think I really want to use Pickpocket to try to drive my early game power leveling. So we'll see how that goes. I don't have anything to say about speech. I think that covers the basics. Overall, I was really happy about how I managed to navigate my first playthrough. I feel like I ended up plenty strong in the end. I feel like I crafted a pretty competent set of armor and weapons. And I don't feel like I really missed the boat too badly. Certainly, like I said, in regards to the crafting trees, there's another level that we can take this to. And certainly I'm going to try to do that in my next playthrough. But for going in blind, I think it worked out pretty well. Now, shifting gears, looking forward to my next playthrough, my survival playthrough. Race. Obviously, I did Nord on my first playthrough here, and I think that was a pretty strong pick, quite frankly. After looking into the details on the races, I think Nord is pretty strong. I think it's probably top 3 in my book, but I think the best is Altmer. And the short answer is they're the best because they're the fastest. And in addition, I did the male character, obviously. So as I did with Fallout 4, and as I kind of like to do with these games in general, I'm going to do a female character. So I can kind of see that side of it as well. Now, Fallout 4 was super disappointing because it really didn't matter. As opposed to Fallout 3, which I felt like kind of set the bar a little higher in terms of meaningful sex-based ramifications and decisions. Fallout 4 is pretty disappointing. I don't expect Skyrim to be any different. I don't think they're going to care one lick about male or female here. But we'll see. I'm going to mix it up. So I'm going to be a high elf female. That's the sneak peek on what's coming. Also, what's coming is a whole lot of mods. I literally have about 24 mods holstered and ready to go. I've done my research. First and foremost among those mods is the unofficial patch mod. And I mean, if I wasn't such a stickler for how I do first playthroughs, I probably should have installed that right away. But hey, I think the game did pretty well. There were definitely some bugs that I hit, and maybe the patch would have addressed them. But it wasn't too terrible. But we'll have the patch in place for our next playthrough. Now, one of the devils in the details there is how they quote-unquote fixed your interactions with trainers. One of the sort of tricks that I discovered was that for trainers that are also companions, you can have them train you, and then you can just take your gold back from their inventory. And I can understand why someone might view that as an exploit. I get that. But what the patch does to solve it, quote unquote, is they just take that money out of the world entirely. Like the second you hand them the gold, it just vanishes from the game world. It's not in their inventory, nor can you even pickpocket it off of them. It's just gone. So to me, That's the worst possible solution. Like, if we're talking about quote-unquote realism and trying to be true to the simulation, that's not realistic. That's the opposite of realistic. Having the gold just vanish from the game world. So I think that's a crappy solution. So I downloaded a mod to undo the patch mod's patch. So that the gold still works like it did before. So if I want, I can still take my money back from companions. Which, again, I don't think is as game-breaking as just deleting the gold entirely. But obviously that's a little subjective. But similarly, pickpocketing, because if it was one thing, it was be like, hey, when you give them the gold, you can't take it back from their inventory, but it's on their person so you can pickpocket it. That, I think, would have been an appropriate sort of solution. But my other beef here is the fact that I'm pretty sure it was working as designed. Like, the developers had ample opportunity with the expansions to change those interactions with training companions, and they did not. So I don't agree with how the patch mod works. Like I said, I'm going to revert it. And, you know, I'm going to engage those systems. They gave us an entire skill tree for pickpocket. I'm going to pickpocket money. I don't think that's an exploit. That's the game working as designed. Is it unscrupulous? Yes. I would definitely say it's unscrupulous. If you're role-playing a diehard sort of benevolent character, that's not the sort of thing you should get up to. But nevertheless, that's where we're at. Another big mod that's going to be in play is the Sky UI mod, which changes the user interface. And since I have everything installed now, I can actually pull that up here. And you can see how it completely changes your inventory screen. It's sort of easier to sort things, easier to navigate things, easier to kind of see at a glance. Information is much more dense. And part of the reason this is important is because it's going to dovetail really well with the Sunhelm survival mod. So after reviewing sort of the vanilla survival mode, I found it lacking. or it left me wanting, put it that way. So I've selected Sunhelm as my survival mod of choice, and it integrates very well with the Sky UI. So those are sort of a pair. And one of the things I really like about the Sunhelm survival mod is that you can configure some things. And number one on the list for me was you can enable fast travel. By default, survival mode disables fast travel. That's something that I, experimented with, if you will, experienced in the Fallout games, and I'm not interested in that. I don't hate myself that much to disable fast travel. That's just kind of ridiculous to me. Does it break the immersion, quote unquote? Maybe. Maybe it does. But this game was designed for fast travel, like fundamentally. One of the big things they do in Skyrim is these Radiant quests, which are just like randomly generated quests. They'll send you all over the frickin' map. So clearly they designed this with the idea, you're going to fast travel around. We're going to take you coast to coast. And even if we're not talking about Radiant quests, just the frickin' story quests, you're going back and forth and back and forth. To do that all by foot is insane. Like again, I don't hate myself that much to do that. Especially when it doesn't contribute to any meaningful aspect of the challenge. Like, in order to fast travel somewhere, you have to get there initially, right? So I've successfully made the trip. Why do I have to repeat that voyage over and over and over as you send me back and forth across the map? So I could go on and on. Suffice to say, being able to enable fast travel in survival mode is very important, and Sunhelm allows me to do that. There's probably going to be one or two other bells and whistles in there that I'm going to take advantage of, but that was the big one. And it seemed to cover the bases in terms of food, water, heat, and these sorts of metrics for fatigue, so sleep. So it should be everything we sort of expect from a kind of survival mode experience. Last but not least, in regards to mods, I mentioned going female high elf earlier, and I think that's especially relevant because, newsflash, the high elves in this game are hideous. And furthermore, the female high elves, that's about the most unattractive thing I've ever seen in my life. So that needed a lot of attention. And fully 15 of the 24 mods that I'm running address the character creation process. So rest assured, I'm not going to have some ratchet ass female high elf from the vanilla character creator. I brought the appropriate mods to bear, I think, that we should have a very aesthetically pleasing character. That's the plan. As far as some of the particulars of what that character is going to be doing, obviously for those who may have seen my Fallout 4 survival treatment and my second playthrough there, I'll be looking to be much more aggressive in my decisions. I'm not going to say it's an evil playthrough per se, but the focus is min-maxing. The focus is on wringing as much power out of this experience as we can. So often correlated with that are some morally ambiguous, let's say, choices. So definitely going to be sort of a different demeanor in how I navigate the decisions in the game. That said, I'm not terribly interested in just doing repeats of quests we've already seen in the first playthrough. I think that's boring, and there's not enough variation that I've seen in decisions or outcomes in this game that it really warrants playing the same quest twice, trying to look for a different path. There might be a couple corner cases where that makes sense. I'll handle it on a case-by-case basis, but this is not going to be a cookie-cutter copy of the first playthrough. I'm going to try to make it very different and sort of showcase aspects of the game we didn't get to see on that first playthrough. Right at the top of the list there is Dark Brotherhood. I summarily executed the Dark Brotherhood in my first playthrough. I felt like that was the RP sort of thing to do in the moment. But this time, we are definitely going through the full Dark Brotherhood quest line, and I want to do that very early in my playthrough. In addition, Thieves Guild. I kept talking about it or mentioning it and never got to do the full Thieves Guild on the first playthrough video. So, and that was a bit of a strategic choice towards the end because I was sort of planning on doing that with my more edgy character in my second playthrough. So, Thieves Guild is happening. That's on the docket. The other thing that I'll mention for quests is the Daedric artifacts. I didn't showcase many of those quests in my first playthrough. There were some that I just stumbled into. Right, there was the Dawnbreaker sword. There was the Mask of Clavicus Vile. There were a few, but there was a whole bunch that we didn't do. And in particular, there's a couple that would have been really useful. And one of them is a mace that has a soul trap enchantment on it, I believe. So suffice to say, for the purposes of our min-maxing, I'm going to want to feature a couple of those quests for Daedric artifacts that were not filmed in the first playthrough. Last but not least, with my next playthrough, vampire, and I guess Dawnguard more broadly. The Dawnguard expansion is one of those places where there really was sort of a fork in the road, and for the sake of the stream, I think I really want to lean towards the vampire side. I'm a little torn though. So the options are either I just don't bother recording that at all because we kind of saw it all already, or I do but go the vampire route. And part of the reason I'm torn a little bit is that I don't want to be a vampire. Like, I've been milling over it quite a bit, and I guess there was a point in the game where the necrophage perk in the restoration tree was a big deal because it was buffing vampires crazily. So there was huge incentive to be a vampire. But the unofficial patch mod fixes that nonsense. So it's much less appealing. It's still tempting, right? Because it gives you 100% poison resist, 100% disease immunity. You get increased cold resist, but decreased fire resist. You also get sort of a night vision thing you can activate. It's close. I feel like it's a really tough call. It's like the value proposition is almost worth it to be a vampire, but then just like never transform. We'll see. I haven't really decided what I want to do with that yet. And I think that's it. I think that's everything I wanted to cover in this episode 0. I'm definitely excited to start anew with a brand new character. So I hope you'll join me for it. Until then, thank you all so much. Please like and subscribe. This has been Honestman, and I'll see you next time with a brand new campaign of Skyrim.